Shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to begin by saying Barak Atah, Yahweh, Ba'asham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakah, Kadash, double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Salutations to the sincere Aki. I'm pushing this truth in all due diligence and sincerity. Every once in a while, man, you come across, you know, some gems on the socials. And in this particular episode, I want to go into redlining. Redlining is a discriminatory practice that was put into place by Esau Edom, where they would essentially segregate so-called blacks, so-called Negroes, which is basically the southern kingdom of Israel when they came over to the Americas, by making sure that they stayed subjugated in poor ghettos and basically pretty much downgraded the house prices wherever Jake were at, man. But at the same time, they would increase the APRs, the interest rates of the loans that they would charge to Jake. In some cases, charging Jake even 20% annually, man, an annual equivalent rate, or in order to get a home, man, 20% on a mortgage plus, making it impossible for Jake to be able to get on the housing ladder. And then when eventually the so-called Negroes, our people, started moving out of the areas, they'd get Edomites in there to buy up the cheap housing, and ultimately, man, it like start to force Jake out there, man. Because Edomites moving into a neighborhood would drive up the value of the area, whereas Jake being there, when Jake was there, Esau Edom would purposely, man, put these sort of practices into place where they'd essentially make it difficult for Jake to acquire lending in order to purchase the homes. And then if they did even get the chance to get loans out, they'd outprice them, man, by just making the interest stupid and pretty much impossible to pay. Let's check this video out.
Charging Negroes more than 20%? There's no way anyone can get out from under that.
If your bank wasn't legally prohibited from lending the Negroes, you do the same.
Within reason.
6%, fellas, huh? Let's get this done. The city will approve any new Southland Trust development in East Compton once all the original owners have sold.
Not a given.
Tell me my fucking business. Chicago, Baltimore, Lansing,
Oakland, Seattle.
Now that was foresight. Move just one black family into a decent white neighborhood, and the other homeowners will throw money at you faster than you can count it.
Negroes aren't stupid. Given a choice, even they don't want to live among other Negroes.
Nothing more American than people willingly paying double for something they can't afford in the first place.
And what happens once they realize they have been swindled?
Well, you could always ask Miss Coyster if you could borrow a sanitary napkin.
If they make their mortgage payments, we win. If they default, we win.
Oh, you pray they miss their nut, and then you put those houses right back on the market.
At another markup. And by this time, it's an all-Negro neighborhood.
An entire population of Negroes who can't secure traditional mortgages.
Do you need an abacus?
Uncle, 6%. Oh, there you go. Wait, you're charging Negroes.
You get the point. Basically, they were charging Jake, man, extortionate rates for their homes, man. Just a second. Give me a second. Wickedness, man. Complete wickedness. Unrighteous decrees, as is written within the scriptures. Just a sec. Now, you know what the scriptures say in regards to that. Isaiah 10:1. Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that write grievousness which they have prescribed, to turn aside the needy from judgment, and to take away the right from the poor of my people, that widows may be their prey, and that they may rob the fatherless. You see, Esau Edom has hated our people. The scripture describes it as a perpetual hatred, meaning that ultimately, this man wishes our people nothing but ill. Like, he literally, man, wants Israel done away with. And even the basic right of shelter, yeah, this man is not willing to afford our people. Redlining is a process that still exists today. Hence why you have ghettos today. You look at America, you've got certain parts of New York, Brooklyn, the Bronx. You've got Philadelphia, Detroit, a perfect example. Even in London here, brothers in the UK, we have, Lambeth in South London, the borough of Hackney, Haringey, where I went to school. And those areas are generally changing, but it's because they're moving a lot of Jake families that used to be in those areas out, and basically gentrifying the areas, moving in a lot of Edomites, man, what used to be middle class Edomites, and ultimately, man, have changed up the faces of the areas, kicked out the shopkeepers, the Jake shopkeepers replaced them with coffee shops and costas and all the rest of it, because Esau Edom ultimately, man, does not see Jake being a significant part in the New World Order plans that he's got. Redlining. You can get this from various sites, but I've just gone to Wiki for the most simple, straightforward description, in case any brothers haven't, come across this concept previously. Redlining is a discriminatory practice in which services, financial and otherwise, so banks primarily, are withheld, banking services, primarily lending, are withheld from potential customers who reside in neighborhoods classified as hazardous to investments. Like there's a saying in modern day society that your postcode and who you live with and where you live affects your credit score. If you live in an area where people traditionally have bad credit, basically where a lot of so-called Negroes, Latinos, and natives are at, where credit is difficult to come across and there's no financial literacy, your credit is going to be bad, because people are just going to, basically the credit bureaus, the banks are just going to make an assumption that people that live in that general area are living there because it's all they can afford. They're all financially uneducated, and therefore we're going to make it hard for them to get lending. Whereas if you move into a better neighborhood, your credit will actually improve. It's a known fact within banking. But anyway, are withheld from potential customers who reside in neighborhoods classified as hazardous to investment. These neighborhoods have significant numbers of racial and ethnic minorities, Bethnal Greens, Brixtons, Peckhams, those types of areas, and low-income residents. While the best-known examples involve denial of credit and insurance, also sometimes attributed to redlining, in many instances are denial of health care and the development of food deserts in minority neighborhoods. In the case of retail businesses like supermarkets, the purposeful construction of stores practically far away from targeted residents results in a redlining effect. You see, so essentially the maps here that shows those red jurisdictions are areas with high ethnic minorities. Yellow is essentially a mixture, and the green and blue are according to Esau Eden, pretty much the safer zones. Yeah. Reverse redlining occurs when a lender or insurer targets majority minority neighborhood residents with inflated interest rates. Look at that. Reverse redlining occurs where what I was describing, where they hit Jake with those 20% APRs, and I've seen it happen. I used to, see that on a day-to-day basis. Reverse redlining occurs when a lender or insurer targets majority minority neighborhood residents with inflated interest rates by taking advantage of the lack of lending competition relative to non-red line neighborhoods. So in more popular neighborhoods like the North, in this picture, you'll have a lot of different banks. You might have a HSBC, a Lloyds, a Santander that are all offering lending out to those customers. And so because of the fact that there's so much competition, the lenders know that they've got to offer fair lending. Is called the consumer duty, the duty of fair lending onto consumers. Whereas in the South, you might just have one particular bank that's willing to take the risk or really the hit, because they know that they'll be able to get their money back recouped. They might have to play the long game and go through the courts and federal bureaus and all the rest of it, but they might just hit those people with a one-off option of 30% or nothing. And I've seen that type of shit happen. And because Jake don't have the financial literacy, they'll just take the loan out and have to pay £500 extra as an additional expense on top of their rent and all the other stuff they're paying, and they'll just literally just suck it up and do the overtime so they can get the new car and keep up with the Joneses, or get the bigger house for their family and all the rest of it. This is what goes on by taking advantage of the lack of lending competition relative to non-red line neighborhood. The effect also emerges when when service providers artificially restrict the supply of real estate available for loanable funds to non-whites, thus providing alternative pretext for higher rates. Neighborhoods which were targeted for blockbusting were also subject to reverse redlining. And it's a deep concept, real deep concept, but redlining is literally where banks will draw up areas on maps, man, where they're not willing to lend, or reverse redlining where ultimately they know that, most financial service institutions are and organizations are resisting a particular area, so they just take advantage of the people, and particular lenders will go in there with the guise of helping the people, but are out there exploiting them financially. You see, this, man, has been going on for years, and even the other nations up before Esau Edom hated our people and put us in hell and in slums and in ghettos, man. The Egyptians, for example, pursuant to Exodus, the first chapter, now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, behold, the people, the children of Israel, are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. So this particular Pharaoh, for example, this is an example of a heathen looked at our people and thought, fuck, these Israelites are fearful, man. Just in case they come up against us in the future with one of our enemies, let's put some subjection over them. So it says in verse 11, therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. So you see those pyramids, they were built by Israelites, man. But the more they afflicted them, the more they grew, they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. And so despite the fact they were putting hell on us, Jake just kept on multiplying, man. Those Israelite babies kept on coming. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor, and they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick and in all manner of service in the field, slavery, man, and all their service wherein they were made to serve was with rigor. Yeah, so basically, pretty much, man, Israel caught holy fucking hell, pardon my language, under the Egyptians, and we lived in our own separate quarters away from the Egyptians. Also, like that's why when you hear about the plagues, the same plagues that came onto Egypt, the part of the land where the Israelites were dwelling at was untouched, man, by the darkness or the spirit of death, because they painted with their doorposts with the blood of the lamb. But ultimately, the Egyptians, where they dwelt at, man, was affected by the darkness that you could feel, was affected by the plagues in general. The spirit of death fell upon them. That was Yahushua, and at that point in time, because ultimately speaking, they didn't have the covering of the Lord with them, man. But this is an ancient example where the heathen basically put Jake into subjection and forced poverty, abject poverty. They had Jake basically living in the slums, man, whereas the Egyptians were living within their treasure cities that they had forced us to build, But ultimately, the Lord delivered our people from that. You know the whole story with Marshall Moses, and we went out of the land, a great nation, and the Lord split the Gulf of Suez, etc., etc. But we lived in the slums and basically in poverty, man. You know, even in Jerusalem, for example, during the time of Yahushua, although we were in our land, you had it where a lot of Jake were through, man. You had the scribes and the Pharisees, of course, that time that were eating fat, but ultimately, the majority of Jakes at that point in time, man, were going through it, man. Samaria had been taken over by the heathens, and you had it to where um, Samaria had been taken over by the heathens, and you had it to where in Jerusalem, man, Jake were catching holy hell, man. They were paying taxes to the Romans, and ultimately you had a lot of rebellions and riots, man, amongst the Israelites, because ultimately Jerusalem had become a city-state of Rome, and you had to pay tax onto Caesar. So you had groups like the Zealots, etc., rebelling and fighting against that, and Jake were getting besieged, getting attacked. 70 AD is a perfect example of that, where ultimately they cut off supplies into the land of Israel. You had Jake flee in mass from the land. All types of holy hell our people were catching, man. But this redlining practice is pretty much a modern day equivalent, man, where essentially they're not going to come up against you with arms and soldiers, like, well, not just yet anyway, but on a day-to-day basis. But what they will do is cut your access to good quality foods and supermarkets. That's why you'll find the cream of the crop supermarkets, the top-notch ones, like your Waitroses and your M&Ss, only choose particular areas where there's high concentrations of Edomites to dwell at. And in the majority of the urban areas, the most you might get is a local Tesco or like a Lidl, or because they want you accustomed to a certain quality. And even then, those particular stores are then free to manipulate and take advantage of Jake in whichsoever way they see fit. And you know what that is? That is the curses, man. The curses of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, Deuteronomy 28 and 19. Cursed shall thou be when thou comest in, and cursed shall thou be when thou goest out. It says, just a second, I think it's verse 48. It might be what I'm looking for. Uh, Well, verse 40, let me read 43 first. Deuteronomy 28 and 43, the stranger that is within thee shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail. Esau, Edom, is our people, for the most part, can't operate without Esau, Edom. Even in their own land, you go to the west coast of Africa, Jacob over there being ruled by Esau's International Monetary Fund. People are living in ghettos and slums, but the politicians are living fat and skimming off some of the top to Esau, Edom. Because ultimately, man, the Lord Yahweh at the moment has got us in a cursed state, man. But hey, things are about to flip on their head. Verse 48, therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, which the Lord shall send thee against thee, in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness and in want of all things, and he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until he have destroyed thee. You know, hey, you gotta understand that the Heavenly Father, Yahweh Hashem Yahushua, man, put that hell upon us, man, because as a people, we went the hell off. But the Lord Yahweh Hashem Yahushua is going to deliver us, man, out of this hell that we're going through. The Lord is going to beautify Israel once again, and that day is coming, man, where we're not gonna have to be subject to these fuckery conditions we're living in. We're gonna be in better dwelling places, and we're going to be pretty much beautified as a nation again. That time is coming, Israel, man. Stay firm, Akim. Stay strong. You know, this is one of the many fuckery things that Esau Edom has done onto us. But a time is coming where all of that's going to change. You can see that scene that I played earlier in a series on, it should be on Amazon or Netflix, called Them, Them. And hey, man, it's just one of the many things that Esau Edom has done to put Jake in a shithole that he's going to be paid back for. Until the next time, I say shalom.